On Saturday, June 3rd, at the venue coordinator's office, my husband's mistress asked to move our anniversary party to their wedding date. I watched her circle September 9th on the calendar I still had access to. I didn't gasp. I didn't close the laptop. I took a screenshot, saved it to 3 separate drives, and made myself a cup of tea. If you want to know how this ends, subscribe and follow along, because what happened next changed everything. My name is Dr. Iris Calloway, and for 11 years I've studied migration patterns of humpback whales in the coastal waters off Rhode Island. I'm a marine biologist. I track animals that travel thousands of miles with nothing but instinct and memory. I know how to read patterns. I know how to wait. I know that the most important data often hides in the smallest, most overlooked detail, the temperature shift no one else notices. The shift in behavior that happens weeks before the final breach. I met David Calloway at a symposium in Little Rock in 2012. He was charming, articulate, working in nonprofit development. He said he loved my work. He said he admired my focus. We married 10 months later in a small chapel by the water, and for the first 3 years I believed him when he said he supported my research. He attended my lectures. He smiled in photos at fundraisers. He learned the names of the whales I tracked: Juno, Caspian, Marigold. But support, I learned, is not the same as respect. Admiration is not the same as partnership. And love, real love, does not require you to become smaller so someone else can appear larger. The first grant I received was modest, $83,000 from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to fund a 2-year tagging study. David celebrated with champagne. He toasted my success. 2 weeks later, he asked if I could cover the mortgage for a few months while his nonprofit stabilized. I said yes. I always said yes. The second grant was bigger, $212,000, spread over 3 years. Federal funding, strict oversight, specific deliverables. I was proud. David was enthusiastic. He suggested we upgrade our equipment, expand the research team, maybe lease a larger boat. He introduced me to a man named Kyle Pruitt, an accountant who specialized in grant management for nonprofits and research organizations. Kyle had an office in Providence with leather chairs and framed diplomas. He seemed competent. David vouched for him. I signed the paperwork. That was my first mistake, not the signing, the not reading. I was busy. I was on the water 4 days a week, tracking pods, collecting data, managing a team of 3 graduate students and 2 field techs. I trusted my husband. I trusted the man he trusted. I assumed the numbers in the quarterly reports matched the numbers in my research logs because why wouldn't they? The calendar I saw on June 3rd was a shared Google calendar David had set up years ago for us to coordinate travel and events. He'd forgotten I still had editing access. Or maybe he didn't care. By then, I was already the woman he was preparing to leave. His mistress was named Simone Larrabee. She was 29, a marketing consultant with an active Instagram and a habit of tagging locations. I knew about her for 3 months before I saw that calendar entry. I'd found a second phone during a move in March, a cheap prepaid burner tucked inside a gym bag David hadn't used in 2 years. The messages were explicit. The timeline was clear. She thought he was already separated. He told her I was cold, obsessed with work, barely present. I read every message. I took photos of every screen. I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. In marine biology, we call it observational research. You don't interfere. You don't react. You document. I began tracking him the way I tracked whales. Patterns emerged. Late meetings that didn't align with his nonprofit's public events calendar. Charges on our joint credit card for restaurants I'd never been to. Florists I'd never used. A sudden interest in weekend trips to Newport and Cape Cod. Towns where Simone had family. And then the financial documents started looking wrong. I'm not an accountant, but I know how to read a spreadsheet. In April, I requested copies of all grant expenditure reports from NOAA directly, not from Kyle Pruitt. I told the grants officer I was preparing an early renewal application and wanted to ensure our documentation was pristine. She sent everything within 48 hours. I sat at my kitchen table on a Tuesday night and compared the reports Kyle had filed with the actual expenses I'd logged. The numbers didn't match. Equipment I'd never purchased. Vendor payments to companies I'd never hired. Subcontractor fees for work that had never been done. Someone had been siphoning money from my research grant for 18 months. Small amounts at first, $3,000 here, $5,000 there, larger sums in recent months. $18,000 paid to a consulting firm that didn't exist. $22,000 for a vessel retrofit on a boat we'd never upgraded. I pulled David's nonprofit tax filings. Public record, available online. I cross-referenced vendor names. 3 of the fake companies that had billed my grant had also received payments from David's nonprofit in the same fiscal year. Same address, same account numbers. Kyle Pruitt wasn't just David's accountant, he was his partner. And my research funding, federal money with federal oversight, had been paying for both of their lifestyles while David planned a wedding to another woman. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry in the kitchen or throw the phone at his head or demand explanations. I made a list instead. Lists are clean. Lists have order. Lists don't leave room for emotion to cloud the next step. I needed three things: evidence, corroboration, protection. I started with a lawyer, not a divorce attorney, not yet, a white-collar criminal defense attorney named Rebecca Ortiz who'd been recommended by a colleague whose ex-husband had embezzled from their shared business. I met her on a Thursday afternoon in her Providence office. I brought printed bank statements, grant reports, tax filings, screenshots, and a timeline. Rebecca read for 40 minutes without speaking. Then she looked up and said, "You're a victim of grant fraud. This is federal. You need to self-report before they find it themselves, or you'll be implicated. I didn't take anything. You're the principal investigator. Your name is on everything. If you wait, it looks like you knew." She leaned back. "But if you report it now, with full documentation, you're a witness. Possibly even a cooperating victim. That's the difference between losing your career and keeping it." I hired her that day. The second call I made was to NOAA's Office of Grants Management and Oversight. I reported suspected misuse of federal funds under grant number NOAAHB 20198473. I provided documentation. I provided names. I requested a formal audit. The officer's voice was calm, almost bored, like she handled this weekly. She said someone would be in touch. They were. 2 days later, a federal investigator named Martin Coulter called and asked if I was available to meet in person. I met him at a coffee shop in Providence on June 12th. He wore a gray suit and carried a leather folio. He asked careful questions. He took notes by hand. He asked if my husband knew I was reporting this. "No." "Do you share finances, a joint checking account and a mortgage?" "That's all." "Does he have access to the grant accounts?" "No, but his accountant does." Martin wrote that down. "How long have you known about the affair?" 3 months. "About the money?" 6 weeks. He looked up. "You've been living with him knowing both for 6 weeks?" I needed to be sure. "You're sure now?" "Yes." He closed his folio. "Don't tell him. Don't move money. Don't change anything. We'll take it from here." I went home and made dinner. David came home at 7:30. He kissed my forehead. He asked about my day. I told him about a tagged whale we'd tracked off Block Island. He smiled. He said that sounded great. We ate pasta. We watched television. He fell asleep on the couch. I sat in the kitchen and updated my spreadsheet. On June 19th, the shared calendar updated again. Simone had added a new entry: venue deposit due, final walkthrough August 4th. The venue was the Rosecliff Mansion in Newport, a Gilded Age estate overlooking the ocean. I'd been there once for a fundraiser. It cost a fortune to rent. I opened my banking app. Our joint account had been drained by $6,000 2 days earlier. The memo line said event planning. He'd used our money to pay for his wedding to her. I took another screenshot. I didn't move the money back. I didn't close the account. I added it to the file. Rebecca called me on June 21st. "The federal audit is moving faster than I expected. They've frozen the grant accounts pending investigation. You'll be interviewed formally next week. Don't be scared. You're the victim here. Just answer truthfully. What about David? They'll get to him. He's not the priority yet. The accountant is. But they'll follow the money, and the money leads to both of them. How long? Weeks, maybe a month. Federal cases move carefully." I thanked her and hung up. I pulled up the calendar one more time. September 9th, 11 weeks away. I didn't think they'd make it that long. I was right. On July 2nd, 2 federal agents arrived at Kyle Pruitt's office with a warrant. They seized computers, files, client records. Kyle called David within the hour. I know because David came home early, pale and sweating, and locked himself in the study for 2 hours. When he came out, I was reading on the couch. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine, work stuff. Anything I can help with?" "No." His voice was tight. "It's handled." He didn't sleep that night. I heard him pacing. I heard him on the phone in the garage, voice low and sharp. I stayed in bed. I didn't ask questions. The next morning he was gone before I woke. He left a note on the counter, had to go to Newport for a few days. "Work thing, I'll call." He didn't call. Simone's Instagram told me everything I needed to know. Photos of cocktails by the harbor. A sunset from a hotel balcony. A candid shot of David on a restaurant patio, looking stressed but present. The caption, "Figuring things out together." I sent the screenshots to Rebecca. She replied in under a minute. "If he runs, it's worse for him. Let him go. Stay visible. Keep working." So I did. I went out on the water. I tracked Marigold and her calf through the shipping lanes. I reviewed data with my students. I attended a department meeting. I presented a preliminary report to my program director, carefully stripped of any financial details. No one knew yet. The investigation was quiet. I intended to keep it that way until it wasn't. David came home on July 9th. He looked thinner, older. He didn't apologize for leaving. He didn't explain. He microwaved leftovers and sat at the table scrolling his phone. I asked how Newport was. Fine. Work stuff resolved? For now. That was all. On July 14th, I was formally interviewed by 2 federal investigators in a conference room at NOAA's regional office in Narragansett. They recorded everything. They asked about my research, my budget, my oversight process. They asked about Kyle Pruitt. They asked about David. I answered every question. I showed them my records. I explained the discrepancies I'd found. I gave them the documentation I'd compiled, clean and complete. At the end, Martin Coulter asked, "Why didn't you notice earlier?" I trusted the wrong people. Do you still live with your husband? Yes. Does he know you're here? No. The other investigator, a woman named Agent Voss, leaned forward. Has he tried to access any of your accounts or records recently? Not that I've seen. If he does, call us immediately. I promised I would. I drove home along the coast. The water was gray-blue and flat. I thought about migration, about the way whales return to the same feeding grounds year after year, no matter how far they travel. Instinct and memory. Pattern and survival. Some animals adapt, some don't. I was adapting. On July 20th, David sat me down in the living room. His face was serious. He'd rehearsed this. "Iris, I think we need to talk about our future." I set my book down. "Okay. I don't think this is working anymore. I don't think we're happy." "You're not happy," I said. "Neither are you." "I didn't say that," he exhaled. "I think we should separate. Cleanly, amicably. I don't want this to get ugly." "What does cleanly mean?" "We split things fairly. The house, the accounts. We both move on." "You've already moved on." He blinked. "What?" "You've been planning a wedding for 3 months, David. September 9th. Rosecliff Mansion. You paid the deposit out of our joint account on June 17th. His face went white. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't stand. "You're not asking for a separation. You're telling me you want a divorce so you can marry Simone without looking like the villain. How did you—" "The calendar. You never removed my access." He stared. "I've known since June," I said. "I've known about her since March. I found the phone." "Jesus, Iris." He ran a hand through his hair. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I was waiting." "For what?" "For you to finish digging." He didn't understand. "Not yet." "You can have the divorce," I said. "File whenever you want. But the house stays mine, the accounts stay separate, and you're going to need a very good lawyer." "For a divorce?" "For the fraud." The color drained from his face completely. He tried to deny it. He said I was confused, that I didn't understand how grant accounting worked, that Kyle handled everything and if there was a problem it was a mistake, an error, nothing intentional. I let him talk. I didn't interrupt. When he finally stopped, I said, "You billed my federal research grant for equipment we never bought, contractors we never hired, and services we never received. You funneled that money through fake vendor accounts that also billed your nonprofit. Kyle filed the reports. You spent the money. That's wire fraud, David. That's theft of government funds. I didn't. I reported it 4 weeks ago." NOAA's investigators froze the accounts on June 22nd. They executed a warrant on Kyle's office on July 2nd. "That's why you ran to Newport. That's why you've been afraid to come home." His hands were shaking. "You used my work," I said. "My credibility, my name. You stole from the research I've spent a decade building, and you did it to fund a life with someone else." "Iris, I can explain." "No, you can't." I stood. "You're going to move out. Tonight. You're going to take whatever you can carry and you're going to leave. If you want to negotiate the house or the accounts, your lawyer can speak to mine. But you don't get to sit here and pretend this is a mutual decision or a misunderstanding. Where am I supposed to go?" "I assume Simone has room." He left that night. 1 suitcase, his laptop, his car. He didn't say goodbye. I changed the locks the next morning. Rebecca called on July 23rd. "The federal investigation has expanded. They're looking at David's nonprofit now too. Apparently he's been running a similar scheme with donor funds. It's bigger than we thought." "How much?" "Preliminary estimate, around 400,000 total, across multiple sources." "Your grant was just one piece." I sat down. "They'll want another statement from you," Rebecca said, "probably in the next 2 weeks." "And Iris?" "Yeah? You did the right thing. If you'd waited, if you'd tried to protect him or cover it up, you'd be facing charges too. You saved your career." "I didn't do it to save my career, I know. But you did anyway." I spent the next 3 weeks working. I was out on the water almost every day. Marigold's calf was growing fast, learning to breach, learning the routes. My students were collecting clean data. The research was good. The work was solid. At night, I sat in the house alone. It was quiet. I didn't miss him. I missed who I thought he was. But that person had never existed. On August 10th, David's lawyer sent a proposed settlement. He wanted half the house, half my retirement account, and spousal support for 3 years. Rebecca laughed when she read it. He's delusional. What do we counter? Nothing. We wait. In about 2 weeks, he's not going to be worried about spousal support. She was right. On August 18th, federal agents arrested David Calloway and Kyle Pruitt on charges of wire fraud, theft of government property, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The arrest was quiet, professional, no drama. They were processed, arraigned, and released on bond within 24 hours. The charges were public record. A reporter from the Providence Journal called me the next day. I declined to comment. David called me 6 times that week. I didn't answer. His lawyer sent an email requesting an emergency meeting to discuss options. Rebecca replied that I had no interest in discussing anything outside the formal divorce proceedings, which were now stayed pending the outcome of the criminal case. Simone's Instagram went dark. The wedding venue deposit was non-refundable. By early September, the federal case was moving toward a plea negotiation. Rebecca kept me updated. Kyle Pruitt was cooperating, giving interviews, turning over records. David's lawyer was trying to negotiate a deal. The prosecutor wasn't interested in anything less than full restitution, a guilty plea, and jail time. David had stolen from the federal government. There was no version of this where he walked away clean. On September 9th, the day he was supposed to marry Simone, I was 70 miles offshore tracking a pod of 6 humpbacks through the deep water east of Block Island. The sun was bright. The ocean was calm. Marigold surfaced twice, her calf beside her, both of them moving south toward their winter grounds. I took notes. I logged coordinates. I radioed the data back to my team. I didn't think about David. I didn't think about Simone, or the wedding that wasn't happening, or the venue that sat empty in Newport. I thought about migration. About animals that know when to leave and when to return. About the instinct that tells you when a place is no longer safe. I'd left. Not physically, not yet. But I'd already moved on. The divorce was finalized on October 3rd. David's assets were frozen pending restitution orders, so there was nothing to split. The house was solely in my name, purchased before the marriage with my own savings. He had no claim. He signed the papers from his lawyer's office. I signed them from mine. We never spoke. On November 12th, David Calloway pleaded guilty to 2 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of theft of government funds. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution to Noah and the 3 other organizations he defrauded. Kyle Pruitt received 6 years. Simone never contacted me. I never contacted her. I don't know if she knew, if she suspected, if she stayed. I don't care. By December, my grant funding was fully restored. Noah issued a formal letter acknowledging that I had been the victim of fraud, that I had reported it promptly and in good faith, and that my research would continue without interruption. My program director called personally to apologize for the disruption. I told her it wasn't her fault. I hired a new accountant. I implemented new oversight protocols. I rebuilt. In January, I received an email from a graduate student at the University of Rhode Island. She'd read my published work on humpback maternal behavior and wanted to know if I was accepting new research assistants for the spring season. Her name was Ayla Tan. She was 24, sharp, eager, finishing her master's in marine ecology. I interviewed her over coffee in Providence. She asked good questions. She understood the data. She wasn't afraid of early mornings or cold water. I hired her. In February, we tagged 3 new whales off the coast of Narragansett. Ayla was careful, methodical, good with her hands. She reminded me of myself 10 years ago, before I'd learned to doubt my instincts, before I'd learned that competence isn't the same as safety. One afternoon, after a long day on the water, she asked me why I did this work. We were standing on the deck, pulling off gloves, our breath visible in the cold air. I thought about it. Because they're predictable, I said, not in a boring way, in a reliable way. They do what they're built to do. They migrate, they feed, they protect their young. They don't pretend. She nodded. People pretend, yes. Is that why you work alone? I don't work alone. You're here, she smiled. You know what I mean. I did. I worked with someone I trusted once, I said. I thought partnership meant sharing everything, finances, decisions, risk. It didn't occur to me that someone could take the sharing and turn it into taking. Your ex-husband. I didn't ask how she knew. The case had been public. My name had been in the filings. Yeah, I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm not. And I wasn't. In March, I received a letter from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. David had requested that I be added to his approved correspondence list. I could write to him if I wanted. I could visit. I threw the letter away. In April, Marigold returned. We spotted her off Point Judith on a clear morning, her calf now a juvenile. independent but still traveling close. Ayla helped me log the sighting. We tracked them for 6 hours, photographing dorsal fins, recording dive intervals. She comes back every year? Ayla asked. Every year. Same route, same feeding grounds. How do they remember? Instinct. Experience. They learn the route when they're young, and they don't forget. Ayla was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you think people can do that? Come back to a place after something bad and make it good again?" I thought about the house in Providence, the one I'd almost lost, the one I'd fought to keep. I thought about the water, the work, the mornings on the boat when the only sound was wind and waves. "Yeah," I said. "I think they can." By May, the research season was in full swing. We had funding for another 3 years. NOAA had approved an expanded tagging study. I'd hired 2 more field techs and a data analyst. The team was good. The work was clean. I didn't date. I didn't look. I wasn't interested. One evening in late June, I was sitting on the back deck of my house with a glass of wine and a stack of field reports. The sun was setting over the water. The air smelled like salt and cut grass. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. "Thought you'd want to know. Simone Larrabee filed a civil suit against David last week. Fraud, emotional distress, breach of promise. She's claiming he lied about his finances and his divorce status. Sounds like she lost money too." I read it twice. Then I set the phone down. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel sorry for her. I felt nothing. She believed him. I believed him. We'd both been wrong. The difference was, I'd stopped believing in time to protect myself. I didn't reply to Rebecca. There was nothing to say. In July, I gave a lecture at a symposium in Boston on long-term tracking methodologies in migrating marine mammals. The room was full. Researchers, students, a few journalists. I spoke for 40 minutes. I showed maps, data visualizations, video footage of Marigold and her calf. During the Q&A, someone asked how I maintained consistency across years of research when conditions changed, when funding shifted, when variables disrupted the work. I thought about that question longer than I should have. "You build systems," I said finally. "You document everything. You don't rely on memory or goodwill or assumption. You create redundancy, you protect your data, and when something breaks, you don't pretend it didn't. You acknowledge it, you adjust, and you keep going." The room was quiet. "Good research isn't about perfection," I said. "It's about honesty. If you're honest about what you know and what you don't, you can recover from almost anything." Someone in the back row started clapping. Then the rest of the room joined. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I nodded once and stepped off the stage. Afterward, a woman in her 50s approached me near the coffee table. She introduced herself as Dr. Lena Kovac, a program director at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute. "That was a good talk," she said. "Thank you. I've been following your work since the NOAA case. I'm sorry you went through that." "I'm not." She raised an eyebrow. "I mean it," I said. "It clarified things." She smiled. "We're looking for a lead researcher on a 5-year cetacean behavior study. West Coast-based, full funding, your own team. I think you'd be a good fit. I'm based in Rhode Island, I know. Think about it anyway." She handed me her card and walked away. I stood there holding it, staring at the embossed logo, the San Francisco address. I didn't decide that night. But I kept the card. In August, I took a weekend and drove to Newport. Not to the mansion, not to the venue, just to the cliffs, to the overlook where the tourists gathered to watch the ocean. I stood there for an hour, watching the water. It was the same water I worked on every day, the same Atlantic I'd studied for a decade. But from up here, it looked different, wider, endless. I thought about what Lena had said, a new coast, a new team, a fresh start. I wasn't running, I wasn't hiding, I was just considering whether I wanted to stay in a place because it was mine or because it was still the right place. There's a difference. By September, I'd made my decision. I accepted the position in Monterey. I gave NOAA 4 months' notice. I helped them transition my current projects to another researcher. I trained Ayla to take over the field coordination. She was ready. She was better than ready. I put the house on the market in October. It sold in 3 weeks, over asking. A young family bought it, a couple with 2 small children who stood in the backyard and talked about building a garden, about how their daughter would love the view of the water. I signed the papers in November. I didn't feel sad. I felt light. I packed everything I owned into a moving truck on a cold morning in early December. Ayla came to help. So did 2 of my students and Rebecca, who showed up with coffee and donuts and spent 2 hours wrapping glassware in newspaper. "You're really doing this," Rebecca said. "I'm really doing this good." She handed me a mug. "You earned it. I'm not running away, I know. You're running toward." I looked at her. "There's a difference," she said. "I drove across the country in 6 days. I took my time. I stopped in Cleveland, in Chicago, in Denver. I stayed in roadside motels and ate diner food and listened to podcasts about whales and migration and the deep ocean trenches no one had fully mapped. I arrived in Monterey on December 18th. The coast was green and gray and beautiful. The research institute sat on a bluff overlooking the bay. My new office had windows that faced the water. I started work in January. The team was good, the funding was solid. The whales were different here, grays and blues instead of humpbacks, but the work was the same: track, document, analyze, protect. I was good at it. In February, I got an email from Ayla. She'd been accepted into a PhD program at Scripps. She wanted to study maternal behavior in deep-diving cetaceans. She thanked me for the recommendation letter. I wrote back and told her I was proud of her. In March, I received a letter from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. David had been transferred to a minimum security facility in Pennsylvania. His earliest release date was listed as November 2026. The letter said he'd completed a financial literacy course and was working in the prison library. I didn't reply. I recycled the letter. In April, I was out on the water tracking a pod of gray whales when one of my techs, a guy named Omar, asked if I'd ever worked on the East Coast. I lived there for 15 years, I said. Did you like it? I thought about that. I liked the work. I didn't like the life I built around it. What's different now? Now I know the difference. He didn't ask me to explain. He didn't need to. In May, the Monterey Institute hosted a symposium on climate impacts on marine migration. Researchers came from all over the world. I gave a presentation on behavioral adaptation in humpback whale populations over the last decade. I used data from my Rhode Island years. I used Marigold as a case study. During the Q&A, someone asked if I was still tracking her. No, I said, but a colleague is. She's still returning every year, still following the same route. Do you miss it? That research? I paused. I miss her. But I don't miss the place I had to be to study her. The room understood. In June, I met someone. Her name was Dr. Penelope Graham. She was a visiting researcher from New Zealand, a specialist in acoustic communication in deep-sea cetaceans. She had short dark hair and laugh lines and a dry sense of humor that caught me off guard in the best way. We met at a data-sharing workshop. We ended up sitting next to each other at lunch. She asked about my work. I asked about hers. We talked for 2 hours. She asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime. I said yes. We went out 3 times before I told her about David, about the fraud, about the divorce. I didn't want to lead with it. I didn't want it to define me. She listened. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said, "That must have been terrifying." It was clarifying. Those aren't mutually exclusive. I smiled. No, I guess they're not. Are you okay now? Yeah, I am. And I was. We kept seeing each other. Slowly, carefully. Coffee turned into dinner, turned into a weekend hiking in Big Sur. She didn't rush. I didn't hide. We both knew what it was like to rebuild after something broke. In August, she asked if I wanted her to stay in Monterey instead of going back to Auckland. What about your work? I asked. I can do it from here. There's a partnership opportunity with the Institute. I'd have to apply, but my supervisor thinks it's feasible. That's a big move. It is. She looked at me. Is it too much? Too fast? I thought about it. I thought about the last time I'd trusted someone, the last time I'd said yes without looking at the details. This wasn't that. It's not too fast, I said. But apply because you want the job, not because of me. I want both. Then apply. She did. She got it. She moved in October. We didn't rush into anything. We kept separate apartments for 6 months. We kept our finances separate. We talked about expectations, about boundaries, about what partnership actually meant. It felt different. It felt right. In December, I got a message from Ayla. She'd tagged a humpback off the coast of San Diego. Genetic analysis suggested it was related to Marigold, possibly her calf, now fully grown and migrating independently. She's following the route, Ayla wrote. Just like her mother, I stared at that message for a long time. Patterns repeat, not because we're trapped by them, because they work. I wrote back, that's good data, keep tracking her. In February of the following year, I testified via video deposition in Simone Larrabee's civil case against David. Her lawyer asked about the timeline, about what I knew and when. I answered every question. I didn't editorialize, I didn't add commentary. At the end, her lawyer asked, "Do you believe Mr. Calloway intended to defraud Miss Larrabee as well as you?" "I believe Mr. Calloway intended to serve himself," I said. Who got hurt in the process was incidental. The case settled 3 weeks later. I never found out the terms. In March, Rebecca sent me a news clipping. David had been denied early release. His sentence would stand. He'd served the full 4 years. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel anything. He'd made his choices. I'd made mine. By spring, Penelope and I had started talking about buying a place together. Not right away, but eventually. Something with space for an office, maybe a yard, close to the water. We went to open houses on weekends. We didn't rush. We knew what we were looking for. In April, I received a letter from NOAA. They were naming a new research fellowship after me, the Callaway Fellowship for Early Career Marine Scientists. It would fund 2 graduate students per year to study whale behavior and migration. I cried when I read it, not from sadness, from relief. My name meant something again, not because of what had been taken from me, because of what I'd built. In May, I flew back to Rhode Island for the fellowship announcement ceremony. It was held at the NOAA regional office in Narragansett, the same building where I'd been interviewed by federal investigators 2 years earlier. The room was full. Colleagues I hadn't seen in years. Students from my old team. Ayla flew in from San Diego. Rebecca came, dressed in a navy suit, smiling from the back row. The deputy director gave a speech about integrity, about resilience, about the importance of scientists who prioritize the work over personal gain. She talked about my research, my contributions to the field, my willingness to come forward when it mattered. I stood at the podium and thanked them. I kept it short. This fellowship isn't about me, I said. It's about the students who'll come after. The ones who are just starting out, who don't have funding or connections or safety nets. I want them to know that good work matters, that honesty matters, that when something breaks, you don't have to disappear. You can rebuild. The room applauded. Afterward, people came up to shake my hand, to thank me, to tell me they'd followed the case and were glad I'd come through it. One woman, a graduate student I didn't recognize, said, "I almost quit last year. My advisor was taking credit for my work. I didn't think I could say anything without losing everything." "What did you do?" I asked. "I documented it. I reported it. I'm still here." "He's not." I smiled. Good. That night, I had dinner with Ayla and Rebecca at a small restaurant overlooking the harbor. We ordered wine and appetizers and stayed for 3 hours. Ayla asked if I missed Rhode Island. Sometimes, I said. I miss the whales. I miss the team. But I don't miss the life I had here. Do you think you'll ever come back? To visit, yeah. To live? No. Rebecca raised her glass. To moving forward, we clinked glasses. To moving forward, I said. The next morning, I drove out to Point Judith. I stood on the rocks where I used to launch the research boat, where I'd spent hundreds of mornings scanning the horizon for whale spouts. The water was gray and restless. A few fishing boats moved slowly offshore. I didn't see any whales, but I knew they were out there, migrating, feeding, following the routes they'd always followed. I stayed for an hour. Then I got in the car and drove to the airport. Penelope picked me up in Monterey that evening. She asked how it went. It was good, I said. It was closure. Do you feel different? I thought about that. No, I feel like myself. That's the best answer. We drove home along the coast road, the Pacific dark and vast on our left. I rolled the window down. The air smelled like salt and cypress and something I couldn't name, something that felt like the future. In June, we made an offer on a house in Carmel. It had 2 offices, a small garden, and a view of the bay. The offer was accepted. We moved in on a Saturday in July. Penelope's friends from the Institute helped. We unloaded boxes, assembled furniture, hung pictures. By evening, the house looked lived in. We sat on the back porch with beer and takeout and watched the sun set over the water. This feels right, Penelope said. Yeah, it does. Do you think you'll stay here? Long term? I don't know. Maybe. Does it matter? She smiled. Not really. As long as we're honest about it. I can do honest. I know. We sat in comfortable silence. The ocean was calm. The sky was turning pink and gold. I thought about David, about the man I'd married, the life I thought I was building. I thought about the house in Providence, the one I'd fought to keep and then sold without hesitation. None of it had been wasted. All of it had taught me something. Love isn't enough. Trust isn't automatic. Partnership is a choice you make every day, with open eyes and clear terms. I learned that the hard way. I wouldn't forget it. In August, the first Callaway Fellows were announced. 2 graduate students, one from Maine studying right whale communication, one from Oregon studying orcapod dynamics. Both were women. Both were first-generation college students. I received thank you emails from both of them. I wrote back and told them I was proud of them, that they'd earned it, that I couldn't wait to see their work. In September, Penelope and I hosted a small dinner party. Colleagues from the Institute, a few neighbors, Rebecca, who flew out for the weekend. We grilled fish and vegetables. We ate on the porch. We talked about research and travel and plans for the fall. Someone asked how we'd met. Penelope told the story, the data workshop, the coffee, the hiking trip. And she didn't run a background check on you first? Rebecca joked. Penelope laughed. I think she did, actually. I smiled. I looked you up. I'm not ashamed, smart, Rebecca said. Always verify, always, I agreed. That night, after everyone left, Penelope and I cleaned up together. We washed dishes. We put away chairs. We stood in the kitchen in comfortable quiet. This is nice, she said. What is this? Us. The life we're building. Yeah, it is. Do you ever think about him? Your ex? I thought about that. Not really. Sometimes I think about who I was when I was with him, but not him. Do you regret it? The marriage? No. I regret not seeing it sooner. But I don't regret leaving. She nodded. Good. We turned off the lights and went to bed. In October, I published a paper on long-term behavioral adaptation in humpback whale maternal groups. It was peer-reviewed, well-received, cited within weeks. Marigold's data was central to the findings. Ayla sent me a message. She's still out there, still teaching her kids the routes. I wrote back, good mothers do that. In November, I got a notification from the Federal Bureau of Prisons Victim Services portal. David had been released early for good behavior. His supervision term would last 2 years. He was living in Pennsylvania. I closed the notification. I didn't save it. He was someone else's problem now, or maybe just his own. In December, Penelope and I spent Christmas in Carmel. We cooked. We walked on the beach. We didn't travel. We didn't need to. On New Year's Eve, we sat on the porch with blankets and wine and watched the stars. What do you want this year? Penelope asked. More of this, I said. Good work, good people, no surprises, she laughed. That's a low bar. I like a low bar. Fair. We sat quietly. The ocean was loud in the dark. I'm happy, I said. Me too. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a revelation. It was just true. In January, I started planning a new research project, a 5-year study tracking gray whale calves from birth through their first full migration cycle. It was ambitious. It was exactly the kind of work I loved. Penelope was co-investigator. We wrote the grant proposal together, late nights at the kitchen table, laptops open, coffee mugs accumulating. We submitted it in March. We were notified of funding approval in May. The work would start in the fall. In June, I received an email from Simone Larrabee. The subject line was, I'm sorry. I stared at it for a long time. Then I opened it. The message was short. Dr. Calloway, I know you have no reason to read this or respond. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't know he was still married when we started seeing each other. I didn't know about the fraud. I didn't know a lot of things. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry for my part in your pain. I hope you're doing well. Simone? I read it 3 times. Then I closed it. I didn't reply. I didn't know her absolution. I didn't know her anything. But I didn't delete it either. Maybe someday I'd respond. Maybe I wouldn't. It didn't matter. In July, Penelope and I celebrated our 2nd anniversary. We didn't make a big deal of it. We went to dinner at a quiet restaurant in Pacific Grove. We talked about the upcoming field season. We talked about maybe getting a dog. A dog is a big commitment, I said. So is a house. So is a joint research project. Fair point. I'm just saying, we're good at commitments, I smiled. We are. So? Dog? Let's wait until after the field season. I don't want to leave a puppy alone for 12 hours a day. That's reasonable. We ordered dessert. We split it. On the way home, she reached over and took my hand. I love you, she said. I love you too. It was easy to say. It was easy to mean. In August, I gave a keynote lecture at a marine biology conference in Vancouver. The audience was large, international, full of people whose work I'd read and respected. I spoke about resilience in cetacean populations. I spoke about adaptation, about how whales respond to changing oceans, changing food sources, changing climates. I spoke about Marigold, about her consistency, her ability to return year after year to the same feeding grounds despite warming waters and shifting prey. Resilience, I said, isn't about being unbreakable. It's about bending without breaking. It's about adapting when you have to and holding steady when you can. It's about knowing the difference. The room was silent. These animals teach us that survival isn't about strength alone. It's about memory. It's about learning from the past and carrying that knowledge forward. It's about building systems that work, and trusting them, and changing them when they don't. I paused. We could learn a lot from that. The applause was long and warm. Afterward, a young woman approached me. She was maybe 25, nervous, holding a dog-eared copy of one of my early papers. Dr. Calloway, I just wanted to say thank you. I read about your case, about what you went through. I'm dealing with something similar right now. A mentor who's been taking credit for my work. I've been afraid to say anything. I looked at her. Are you documenting it? Yes. Do you have support? A lawyer? An advisor you trust? I'm working on it. Good. Don't wait. Don't hope it gets better on its own. Protect yourself first. She nodded, eyes bright. And don't let anyone make you feel small for speaking up, I said. You're not the problem. They are. Thank you, she whispered. I watched her walk away. I thought about the version of myself who'd sat in a coffee shop 2 years ago, terrified and furious and determined not to let fear make my decisions for me. I was glad I'd been that person. I was glad I still was. In September, the new research season began. We were out on the water 5 days a week, tracking gray whale mothers and calves along the central California coast. The data was clean. The team was strong. Penelope and I worked well together, balancing logistics and analysis, field time and lab time. One morning in late September, we spotted a mother and calf just offshore from Point Lobos. The calf was young, maybe 3 months old, still learning to dive. We watched them for an hour. The mother was patient, surfacing slowly, waiting for the calf to catch up. The calf breached twice, clumsy and joyful. "She's a good mother," Penelope said. "Yeah, she is." We logged the sighting, we took photos, we moved on. But I thought about it all day. Good mothers teach the routes. They show you where to go, how to survive, how to come back. My mother had done that, in her own way. She taught me to value work, to ask questions, to stand up when something was wrong. I'd learned. In October, Rebecca called to tell me that Kyle Pruitt had been released on parole. He was living in a halfway house in Providence, working as a bookkeeper for a landscaping company. "Thought you'd want to know," she said. "Thanks. Does it bother you?" "No. He's not my problem anymore." "Good." We talked for a while, about work, about life, about the house in Carmel and the dog Penelope and I were now seriously considering. "You sound happy," Rebecca said. "I am. I'm glad." "Me too." In November, Penelope and I adopted a dog, a 3-year-old rescue mutt named Josie, part border collie, part something else, all energy and affection. She fit into our life like she'd always been there. We took her on beach walks in the mornings before work. She learned to sit in the back of the research boat, calm and watchful. She slept at the foot of our bed. "I told you we were good at commitments," Penelope said one night, watching Josie sprawl across the living room rug. "You were right." In December, I received a letter from David. It came to the Monterey Institute, forwarded through Noah. My name and title were written carefully on the envelope in handwriting I recognized. I held it for a long time. Then I opened it. "Iris, I know I don't have the right to write to you. I know I don't deserve a response. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for all of it. For lying, for stealing, for making you doubt yourself. You were right about everything. I was selfish. I was a coward. I destroyed the best thing in my life because I didn't know how to value it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're happy. You deserve that." David, I read it once. Then I put it in a drawer. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He wanted absolution, or closure, or maybe just to feel like a better person. That wasn't my job. In January, I turned 43. Penelope threw a small party. Friends from the Institute. Ayla, who flew up for the weekend. Rebecca, who sent flowers and called. We ate cake on the back porch. Josie stole a piece of frosting from someone's plate. Everyone laughed. It was simple. It was good. That night, Penelope asked if I'd thought about David's letter. "Not really. Do you think you'll ever respond?" "No." "Are you angry?" "I thought about that." "No, I'm just done." She nodded. "That's fair." We sat quietly. The ocean was loud and dark beyond the garden. "I used to think closure meant confrontation," I said. Like I needed to tell him off or make him understand what he'd done. But I don't. He knows, and if he doesn't, that's his problem. You don't owe him anything. "I know." "Good." In February, our gray whale study published its first preliminary findings. Early data suggested that calves whose mothers had successfully completed at least 3 prior migrations had higher survival rates in their first year. Good mothers teach the routes. The paper was picked up by several science journals. We did a few interviews. The work was getting attention. In March, I was invited to speak at a Women in Science panel at Stanford. The topic was resilience and ethics in research. I almost said no. I didn't want to be known as the scientist whose husband defrauded her. But then I thought about the young woman in Vancouver, the graduate student who'd thanked me for speaking up. I said yes. The panel was on a Saturday afternoon. The room was full. Students, postdocs, faculty, professionals from industry. I talked about my work. I talked about the fraud. I talked about the decision to report it, the fear that I'd lose everything, the relief when I didn't. I thought honesty would cost me my career, I said. It didn't. It saved it, not because I was brave, because I didn't have another choice. Silence would have implicated me. Truth protected me. Someone asked if I regretted marrying David. No, I said. I regret not seeing the signs earlier, but I don't regret the marriage. It taught me what I needed to know. Which is? I thought about that. That love isn't enough, I said. That respect and honesty and shared values matter more. That you can survive betrayal. That you can rebuild. and that the life you build after something breaks can be better than the one you lost. The room was quiet. That's not a sad story, I said. That's a good one. The applause was long. Afterward, half a dozen students came up to talk to me. They told me their stories: bad advisors, stolen credit, toxic lab environments, fear of speaking up. I listened. I gave them Rebecca's contact information. I told them to document everything. You're not alone, I said, and you're not powerless. One of them, a PhD candidate with tired eyes, said, "Did it get easier?" Yes. When? When I stopped waiting for someone else to fix it. She nodded. I watched her walk away and hoped she'd be okay. I thought she would. In April, Penelope and I were out on the water tracking a mother-calf pair near Monterey Bay. The weather was perfect, the ocean glassy and calm. The calves surfaced close to the boat, curious, unafraid. Penelope laughed. She's brave. Her mother taught her well. We watched them for 2 hours. We took notes. We photographed their dorsal fins. We logged GPS coordinates. When they finally dove deep and disappeared, we sat for a while in silence, the boat rocking gently. Do you ever think about what your life would look like if none of it had happened? Penelope asked. If David hadn't stolen from you, if you'd stayed in Rhode Island, I thought about that. Sometimes, I said, but I don't think I'd be here. I don't think I'd have left. I'd have stayed because it was easier than starting over. Do you think you'd have been happy? I don't know. Maybe, but not like this. She reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm glad you're here, she said. Me too. We started the engine and headed back to shore. That evening, I sat on the back porch with a glass of wine and my laptop. Josie was curled at my feet. Penelope was inside making dinner. I opened my email and saw a message from Ayla. The subject line, Marigold sighting, April 15, 24. I opened it. Dr. Calloway, we spotted Marigold this morning off the coast of Nantucket. She's with a new calf. Healthy, active, right on schedule. Thought you'd want to know. Ayla, there was a photo attached. Marigold's distinctive dorsal fin, scarred and familiar, and beside her a small perfect fluke breaking the surface. I stared at the photo for a long time. She was still out there, still migrating, still teaching the routes. I forwarded the email to Penelope with a single line, "She's still going." Penelope replied immediately, "Of course she is. She's Marigold." I smiled. I closed the laptop. I sat back and looked at the ocean, dark and endless beyond the garden. I thought about the version of myself who'd sat in a venue coordinator's office 2 years ago and watched her husband's mistress circle a wedding date on a calendar. I thought about the woman who'd documented everything, who'd reported the fraud, who'd testified and divorced and rebuilt. I thought about the house in Providence I'd fought to keep and then sold without looking back. I thought about the whales, about migration, about the instinct that tells you when to leave and when to return. Some things you carry with you, some things you leave behind. The trick is knowing which is which. I'd learned that. Finally, inside, Penelope called that dinner was ready. I stood. Josie followed me into the house. We ate together at the kitchen table, the windows open, the sound of the ocean drifting in on the cool April air. This was my life now. Good work, good people, honesty, calm. I built it carefully. I built it on purpose. And I wasn't letting go. Money doesn't create integrity. Pressure reveals it. The people who stay honest when no one's watching are the ones you can trust when everyone is. If you've ever had to rebuild after betrayal or fought to protect something you built, share your story in the comments. You're not alone, and you're stronger than you think.